Okay. So, how did your lesson go overall, or just your immediate impression?
Yeah, I think the content in this space that I laid out worked well. It just has, all the constraints that we usually experience sort of working against us, and that's, you know, not knowing how many students are going to be there. Um, and if there are technology issues, that keep class from starting on time, which is what we experienced today. I think
Yeah.
that even with the one student and the four sort of teachers or helpers, we still got through a lot of content
Yeah.
that we wouldn't have been able to get through if we had had like a full class, whatever full means for us in these VR spaces. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
for
think it was
sure.
I think it was solid. I wish there would have been more people here to experience it, but when something's
Yeah. All right.
yeah, cool.
Well,
Well, we happy too.
why don't you take me through your lesson? Do you want to start from the first
Sure.
stage? Where to?
All right. And some things have moved around, so it'll look a little different now. But let's go over to the start. So I envisioned this space number one with like the goals as being like this is where we could sort of like wait for students to join and talk about expectations and things like that. Um, you know, and with all the tech issues like that didn't happen, but I still think
Mm,
that it was okay. And then I have this word wall, which ultimately we would come back to as kind of the cool down if we got to it. But again, didn't necessarily. So I ended up sharing this just to sort of put it on the tip of everyone's brain. Um,
yeah.
and I think we could be much more intentional with this in the future, the same way you would be with a whiteboard, or with any sort of word or phrase list.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first thing. It's just like, here's some of the words I'm going to encourage you to use because this isn't like such a prescriptive lesson. It's not really following any, set fidelity or anything like that. It's just sort of like fun. Maybe these are some language takeaways. And then if
Okay.
you look at the glass over here, we had 9 pictures of different activities there. And so I tried to solicit from Liliana what some of these activities are. Um, and because we had just talked about destination, famous for, and dream, there was a little bit of like um, misunderstanding about just moving from that to just talking about what you could identify in the words or the pictures on the glass. So
Mm-hmm.
then she started talking about in a dream destination she wants to go to and eat tacos.
Yeah.
And so that's a little learning point for me is that the same as with any modality that you're using, like make sure that your instructions are super clear because I
Yeah.
didn't make it clear that we were transitioning from, all right, these things just as, like a bookmark or placeholder for throughout the lesson into then the actual space that had the pictures.
Yeah.
And so then I tried to overcompensate and tried to ask instruction checking questions with this Likert preference climb task. And so we had the nine pictures, and I explained that you're supposed to, I'll identify one of the activities, and you go stand under the number. And so then I tried to ask an instruction checking question about like, and number one means what? And then she misunderstood because my instructions weren't clear and just started to pick one and say that she'd give it a number 4. We ended up getting back on track, and that helped having more people in the space to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would 100% do this activity again, just because it's got the movement factor and it's super simple to set
Oh
up.
yeah. I really
Um,
like this because it does cater to like psychomotor needs. I think probably I think maybe the numbers just being a little larger. And I was also thinking if we had like a huge circle underneath or dividers of some sort, because I realized the
yeah,
numbers weren't enough to understand like, oh, we're supposed to stand there. Um, I think they needed like a pop or something, so that
yeah,
because I felt like she wasn't sure about where do I do I need to just look at the number? It wasn't clear, I guess, that she had to stand underneath. So that's why I was thinking if we had like a big
And
circle under it each, maybe.
that's the other thing about like trying to use the kinesthetic aspect of the space is because from different angles, they look like different things on the wall. Like it's not
Yeah.
obvious how you're supposed to interact with them. When I'm looking at it straight on, it's like, okay, go stand under one seems like, yeah, that makes sense. But if you're just a few angles off, it doesn't necessarily. They just like, they, they just look different, you know? Oh, but I
Yeah.
wanted to circle back to like a big thing that I try to do in any lesson that I teach is take cues from the learners. Um, and when we had the 9 pictures on the wall and I was asking about activities, she said number 7. And so that tells me
Yes.
next time, number the pictures.
Number them. That's
Number them.
exactly what I was thinking. I was like, oh, yeah, she knew it. She's telling us she wants to be able to refer to the pictures because she may not know how to describe them or like the word to describe it. So, yeah, totally.
And that was a conscious choice I made, not the numbering thing, but I was debating having a mixture of pictures and a mixture of words, or like words under them, but I didn't want students to think of it as like an input lesson. So I was lenient with the structures too, only pushing back a little bit. But I think like the numbers for sure would have helped. And in
Mm-hmm.
a larger group, they could just pick the one that they are comfortable with and they feel,
Yeah.
confident
Yeah.
talking about. But yeah, the numbered pictures would have helped. I wonder if that would be confusing with the numbered like preference Klein, but that's
Mm-hmm.
probably overthinking.
Or
Could even assign them.
A, picture B, like we could
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
do something like
totally,
that. I was also thinking too,
totally.
like, what if facilitator picks the picture? Because I think also maybe understanding what picture we were talking about was an initial point of
Mm-hmm.
confusion. So I was wondering, like, if a facilitator takes the picture and like enlarges it, like those kinds of physical motions are good ways to draw attention and be like, okay, here's a picture of a
Yeah.
museum. Do you really want to go to the museum, number one? Or, and maybe like moving. I'm realizing that we have that ability to like draw attention to things just in the way that we move and handle objects as well.
Well, and I did it as an afterthought too, as like I ended up doing that and then I didn't stick with it. It's like I did it so that I made myself better understood, but I didn't with the museum one that had the dinosaur or whatever. But I didn't do that and just like continue with that, like,
Yeah.
but you're totally right. That would have been and maybe even more effective than what I tried to do with setting up the blank space down in the other section, just like make it bigger versus trying to move it because then you don't know if you're going to like pass it through the wall or
Right. Yeah.
whatever. Um,
Well,
but yeah, I
speaking of
really, I
that,
really liked this activity, and I think that with a larger group, you could really get the visual effect, um, and especially if you had like a higher level group and you're talking about things that are much more provocative or controversial,
yeah.
that would be a subject of like a lot of the lesson that you could do.
Yeah. I love that this could serve a lot of different purposes, just this like image and then the scale moving. I think we should probably try this again for like a different topic.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that that's like when you think about these spaces, it's like there are so many opportunities, but then like acknowledging the limitations as well, and then thinking about the limitations in terms of like what worked well despite the limitations, and how
Hmm.
can we exploit the heck out of it,
Yeah.
but slightly change it up a little bit each time. I think that's really smart in platforms that aren't necessarily designed for, classes
For
and things
learning.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. All right. Do you want
Right
to
on.
show the
And so yeah, after this
next?
task, yeah. So after this, we took the 9 pictures and moved them down to space number 3. Originally, I had just a big blank white box because I thought that that would be this like spatial visual like representation of here's exactly where I want you to move the pictures. But like we find out with a lot of this, like it doesn't quite look right. It goes through the white box, and so we ended up deleting that box. And just
Yeah,
having the
that's
space on the
fair.
wall ended up being fine.
Hmm.
And so then I modeled, putting two pictures up and using the sentence frame, would you rather blank or blank?
Right.
And then Liliana struggled a little bit with adding the go, which didn't even occur
Yeah.
to me as like adding that as part of the sentence frame.
Oh, right.
And so I tried to just sort of, redirect her a little bit. She got there ultimately, so I would consider that a language success. It's just a little oversight on my part. If I wanted to use go, like include it in go. So it
Hmm.
was like I would rather museum than camp, or I would
Right.
rather. Yeah. But I
I
still think
was,
that this was fun too. Like model it, and then she did it. Imagine if it was full of like classmates, all of them like doing it and choosing different pictures. I think that would be really fun.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I loved that, you did it, you model it, and then she could have asked another student, and then it could have just gone around the class. I like that potential. When you were talking about the go, like how she couldn't quite get, would you rather go to the beach? I was like immediately tempted to bust out this tool, um, bust out either a note card or the like writing tool, the scribble tool here, and just be like,
Mm-hmm.
go,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
go. Because I thought she could totally do it. She just she wasn't hearing that word, I think, when we said it, go to the beach.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
again, another way that I thought we can take advantage of this, VR, like actually just coming up and drawing like you would in a classroom, right? You'd draw it on the whiteboard and you'd underline it and say like, try it again. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that like if if this was like a really targeted language thing, I probably would have over prepared, with stuff like that. But I wanted to hold back a little bit too, like because then I don't want them to like get so hooked into a sentence frame. So it's like it's a scaffold that's there if you need it. Somebody else might want to go off on a whole tangent about whatever without this language, but they could do it perfectly fine. But I did like that ultimately she got there and I didn't have to fumble because that's the other thing. Like it would have taken a second for me to like, oh yeah, I have this tool. I know how to do this. And that just comes from this being like my first lesson I've ever taught in VR, like
Hmm.
I wish that more students would have been here so I could have seen how that played out, but that's always the wish. But
Yeah.
and then cut this activity a little early because I wanted to get over to the portal. So we'll go hop over here. And this is supposed to be like, so we'll go to the global lounge. Whoop. Yeah, so we got here, and I think like I wanted to be really intentional about the instructions in the space because I didn't know how many people would be here. If there was a larger group, and we had to like consider turn taking and things like that, I think that this would have been more necessary or more impactful with
Hmm.
the focus on Liliana and us just like padding it as we needed to.
Yeah.
You don't really need this. And the same with this, remember to listen so you can share back in the main space. This was going to be for if we had a few different people to share and do that third person transfer once we come back. Like Lauren's dream destination is blah, 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 or Lauren said her dream destination. Fingers crossed we could get some reported speech in there. I don't know. So that was the purpose of this, but it's really easy with just one person. Like, yo, you're gonna answer all these questions. Turn around. Let's look at this wall. And so I categorize this like these questions into go and do questions, not for any particular reason other than maybe that helps someone if they were going to then like extend and ask somebody about their dream destination. Like if you can
Hmm.
think of go questions and if you can think of do questions, that'll help you form like the basis for an interview or something like that. But,
Yeah.
we didn't get to that part. But
Yeah.
and yeah, I think for the most part, these went well. Let me look at these. You want to go Spain, specifically Madrid. The what is this place like? Probably could have had some examples of, and I followed that up with like, is it busy? What's the weather like? Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think it's just a starting point for someone who needs that.
Yeah.
Think of these details, whatever. And then the same thing with the do. And we've got the destination and dream and famous for all of those word wall things. So I should have
Mm-hmm.
included the word wall back in here.
Yeah, that's what I was
Um,
thinking too.
but yeah, and I'm also just thinking about like, and this is really tangential, but like, what if somebody was a late joiner and we were all in these other spaces? How would they even know to find us?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, unless we left some sort of note card by the portal with arrows like, go this
Little
way.
breadcrumbs
Breadcrumbs, yeah.
all over the place.
Yeah,
Um,
I that's a good
but yes,
consideration.
totally, totally right. And it's like you don't want to have like, here's your homeroom monitor, whatever, who's here to Sherpa you to the place. And obviously, you'd love for students to be on time all the time, but they shouldn't be punished for that. Anyway, that
No.
totally, totally tangential. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll talk about the intention of the next part that we didn't get to do, but that would be back in
Learning space.
English 1.
Okay.
I was thinking that would be a wish list item, is if it could return you to the place you came from,
Yes, I'm also
instead of plopping you right in the middle of the space. But
yeah, it's always got to reset you over there. And I'm having difficulty with these portals here in Spatial because every time I go, I try to click on it. It takes several tries in order for me to actually get there.
yeah, so
Yeah.
let's see. Oh yeah, so the intention was going to be then we come back to a space, maybe even just this space, and
Mm-hmm.
do the third person transfer. Like, oh yeah, so in the boardroom, Lauren talked about how she would love to visit. Lauren's dream destination was to come hang out with Julie in North Carolina and eat barbecue a bunch.
Vegetarian
Yeah,
barbecue.
so that was the intention. But again,
Yeah.
starting late, no time, but woo, we're dancing. Um,
Mm.
dancing for you. This is so funny. Yeah, so that would have been the last activity, and then if we needed an extension activity,
Mm.
while people were talking about their dream destinations or reporting about their partner's dream destinations, I would have created a word wall of
Mm.
positive adjectives, and then if we
Yeah.
had time, say now turn it into a nightmare vacation or nightmare
Yeah.
destination, just to sort of expand a little bit, knowing full well that we probably never would have gotten to that even with a full class and even if it started on time. But having that backup
Yeah.
plan, and
I
maybe
think
that's
that should be a next
the
lesson.
next lesson. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah. And for that,
and
why
they
don't
could
we
even like,
explore some 3D environments like of a of a nightmare destination, like get them to have that actual visual in front of them, as opposed to like a very,
yeah, I
luxurious
mean
getaway.
that would be rad. I also thought about having them find their own picture of a place, find their own pictures of activities, but I think that it would be more meaningful to like have that moment of take the time if we're going to do that to actually help them search for a 3D sort of space or have it
Yeah.
provided somewhere from.
Yeah, I was thinking like because I've explored Sketchfab and there you can find some 3D environments, and I was thinking that might be good to like find a few, place them in this space or something. just as a starting point, just to talk about and like, why is this a nightmare destination and why is this a really fun and, dream destination? So they could actually refer to things in that environment. And then later they could possibly bring in their own 3D environment. Yeah, I love that idea.
I'd love to like, I'd love to explore like together as a group, uh, this really like lush, lavish, like resort with all the things you
Yeah.
can do, everything that's all inclusive. Really
Yeah.
get them hyped up about it, and then say, "Do you guys want to go there? I booked it online," and then figure out a way to like go there through one of these portals, and then you show up, and it's like there's a picture of the place that's the lavish place, and then there's the reality, and
Yeah.
really just like extend that sort of experience. Um, because then you show up and it's like rat infested and has roaches and like, the pool's brown and
Yeah.
that would be really
Yeah.
fun.
That'll be meaningful. Well,
Um,
cool.
but yeah, I'll type up the sort of the written recap, the hits and misses, and it'll capture a lot of what we've talked about.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, if anybody's looking at this, you know, feel free to comment. Feel free to comment below. Am I doing it right?
Yeah, that is below. Okay, but before we go,
Yeah.
what are your takeaways? So one thing that you thought maybe it could be a tool, a feature, something in this spatial space that you thought was successful, and maybe something that was a challenge.
I think the challenge and the learning moment for me is to not, especially with the visual part, like if you've got the visual components there, don't try to layer it. So like we didn't need the big white box. I thought that we did. I thought that we might, but a big blank wall worked better than the big white box. So I introduced something that made the task more challenging than it needed to be. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big takeaway. In terms of like what was successful about it, I think in in terms of a language lesson, like the lesson was a good lesson, and
Yeah,
it's more still about like using the environment to best like exploit that.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean that's the challenge, right? Um, yeah,
yeah.
so those I think those are my takeaways. Like,
Okay.
don't introduce complications.
I like that.
You know,
That's a good motto
most
going
people.
into VR, designing learning spaces. Don't introduce extra complications. Great. Thank you,
Yeah,
Julie.
just because you
George.
can doesn't mean you should. Thank you,
Exactly.
Lauren.
Can we? Oh, no, we can't do it. See, I always try to do a high five at the. I tried to do it last time, but I don't think we can. High five.
I know how to do it on my computer. Wait.
All right, give us some moves.
Oh, well, do them all. Okay.
Awesome. All right.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you, Lauren.
you. Bye.
Bye.